A little over 20 years ago, the world had no smartphones, no social media, and very limited access to the internet. Our grandparents could not have imagined the world that we are living in today. In the past, if you had a question about Islam, you had to actually leave your house, find a scholar, and ask him a question directly. A few years ago, I wrote this article called Sheikh Google as Hafiz al-Asr, and this term Sheikh Google is something Muslims use to kind of joke about the relationship between learning and the internet. And I was thinking that even this term Sheikh Google now seems outdated because we've reached a point where we don't only use the internet, we speak to the internet and it speaks back to us. So how did we get to this point where the internet and AI and all of these different things have transformed the way we learned? In this video, my purpose is to walk us through the history of Islamic scholarship, how it functioned, how Muslims learned their religion, and how gradually over the last 100 or so years, with the introduction of new media and the internet and AI, how this changed the way Muslims learned Islam. My purpose is not really to say whether this was a good or bad thing, but rather reflect on how it's impacted us and just lay out the facts. So what is Islamic scholarship and how did the internet change the way we interact with it? If we were to go back and look at how Islam was taught, even to the earliest moments, we will see that there's text and there is a human being. The teacher is one of the most important elements of learning. Why is this? Because a text cannot speak for itself. If you are reading a book, an Islamic history or Islamic law or hadith, and you misunderstand the text, the text cannot speak back to you and say, hey, you are misunderstanding me. This is where the importance of the teacher comes in. In Islamic tradition, if you've ever watched anyone teach Islamic knowledge or hadith or fiqh or anything like this in a traditional way, or you participated in it, you'll notice that this is often done by walking through a text line by line. And what the scholar will actually do is literally open the book and they'll begin from the beginning to the end, reading it, pausing, and commenting on the grammar, commenting on the word choice, commenting on whether there's anything wrong with the text itself, on differences of opinion. And while the teacher is doing this, there's a back and forth between him and the students. So he's asking the students questions. They're asking him questions. Students are reading the text. The scholar pauses and has them reflect on it. This is a form of active learning. And why is this important? Because at the end of this process, the scholar has now produced a student who not only listened to the text, but also he has understood it. This is where in Islamic tradition we have this concept called an ijazah. There's two kinds of ijazahs. There's one where it's kind of just given just for barakah, where you didn't really study the text with a scholar. You just went to him and you spent a little bit of time and he says, hey, here's an ijazah, and he's just giving it to you, but it has no real scholarly significance. You didn't spend the time. The more serious kind of ijazah or license is where someone literally spends a significant amount of time studying the text. The scholar has now knows and he has trust that this student understands the text properly, and the teacher will then give him a license to go about and teach this text. Now, someone may ask, well, can't I just Google things and learn myself? Well, technically you can, because today you have YouTube and you have all of these things. However, there's still the human element that is missing. So for example, if someone wanted to learn a language using only books, right? And they could learn the formal way of what the book tells them, they could learn the grammar, but there's nothing that's going to replace the actual human element, which is going to be going and listening to a person or communicating with a person, and then you're going to listen to the connotations, their word choice, the slang, the exaggerations. All of these things will teach you language in a way that you cannot learn only from a text. So in Islamic tradition, the teacher is one of the most important parts of learning. That's why if you actually look at biographies of Muslim scholars, whether they were hadith scholars or fiqh scholars, you look at their biographies, or their resumes. Their biographies are essentially resumes. Their resumes or biographies don't say where they studied. You'll never say, oh, he studied in this place or that place or this university. They will show their teachers, because the teacher is what gives the person the most authority. Today, what you put on your resume or where you've learned is usually the university. The place is what gives you authority, the institution. But in Islamic tradition, it was the scholar that did that. So even if we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he wanted to teach people Islam, He wouldn't just send the Quran. He wouldn't send a piece of Quran, a page of Quran. He would send a companion to go teach the people. Some scholars have argued that even Uthman radiallahu anhu, when he wrote the script of the Mus'haf and he sent it out to different places, he wrote the script in a way that made it hard for the non-scholar to be able to read the Quran properly without a teacher there, to prevent misunderstanding. There's a second important part that comes with the human element, which is that in Islam, the teacher actually matters. If you are studying engineering and your engineering professor or teacher is an alcoholic, it doesn't really matter. If you're studying math and your math teacher does drugs or is not a moral person, it doesn't really matter. But in Islam, the teacher is actually part of the curriculum. The student is meant to watch and observe the teacher's behavior, his adab, his akhlaq, and he's meant to absorb that and live it himself. This is why Imam Ibn Hazm, he says that the Sahaba are the greatest of all people. And his reasoning is that they had the greatest teacher. He says no one who came after the Sahaba, no matter how great of good deeds they do, even if they give mountains of gold in charity, and they do all of these great things, they will never achieve the status of the Sahaba in greatness, because they were the direct result of this teaching of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way he walked, was a lesson that you cannot learn from a book. To see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way he spoke, the way he forgave, the way he ate, the way all of these things he did was actually a lesson itself. So later scholars came and they tried to embody this. So the Sahaba, we call them the companions because they were the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You'll see that later scholars, they actually they tried to follow the same thing. So you have, for example, Imam Abu Hanifa, and they would say his suhbah, his companions, the students who are around him consistently, learning the text, debating, having conversations, and also learning from the adab of the scholar. So how did this all change in modern history? Actually, if we go back to the year 1798, Napoleon invaded Egypt and he introduced the printing press. The idea of print was actually around in the world. It came to the Muslim world later. The printing press came to the world in around the early 1800s, and this caused a problem for scholars for several reasons. Number one is because scholars of the time, they believed that this idea of having a teacher was very important. And once you start printing, now people have access to text with no teacher. So this created a problem for them. The second thing is they were afraid that this technology is going to take their job. Because when there was no printing, there was an entire class of people whose job was scribes. So if you wanted a copy of this book or that book or a hadith book, you would go to the scribe, you'd pay him some money, and he'd say, okay, come back in a few weeks or whatever, and I'll have Sahih Bukhari ready for you. I'll have this ready for you. And I actually was reflecting on this, and I was thinking, even the process of just writing that book, I'm imagining a scribe who wrote Sahih al-Bukhari by hand so many times. There's actually, I think in my article, I mentioned one scribe who wrote it dozens of times. This relationship he has is with the text that he's copying is so intimate because he's done it so many times and he's written it by hand. He put in much effort. He knows that text intimately, which cannot be had through the printing press. There's other things that happen. Now, the 1800s and 1900s, we now see the Western world advancing. Colonization happens, the West has scientific advancement, they have technological advancement, medicine, all of these things. And in the Muslim world, we see that there is some kind of regression happening or political oppression, and so many things are happening. Now people start questioning the educational systems of Muslims. Even some Muslim reformers and scholars themselves, like Muhammad Abduh, was someone who criticized the traditional way of learning. So Muhammad Abduh, one of his concerns was that the West is doing this and the West is doing that, and he's like, you traditional scholars, you Muslims, you are sitting here and studying what this text says in a very minute issue that happened in Baghdad 700 years ago. He's like, this is completely out of touch with reality. He said we need to stop studying Islam like this, and we need to start studying it in the university system, and introducing other things like different sciences and social sciences and all of these things. So he pushed to introduce the university system in the Arab and Muslim world. the Ottoman Empire falls, and this has another impact on scholarship itself. So in the Ottoman Empire, if someone was a scholar, why would someone go and study for so many years? They study Islamic law for 10 years, 15 years, whatever. They essentially, after this, they get a government job. During the Ottoman Empire and in Islamic history, to become a scholar usually meant that you will have some kind of career. You can become a governor, you could become a lawyer, a judge, you can work in the zakat agencies, you can do all of these things. It usually led to a career. The Ottoman Empire fell. You no longer have an Islamic state. So these scholars are now out of jobs. The only thing that they can work as is an imam. So naturally, people who are smart and intelligent and doing good in school, they want to have a good paying career. So the intelligent Muslim, this is a generalization, but the smarter students usually went into engineering, pharmacy, medicine, sciences, because this is where money was paying. To be an imam, to be a scholar, was the domain of the underachiever. The guy who did bad in school, he couldn't get into the College of Engineering, he couldn't get into the College of Sciences or anything like this. So he's like, all right, I'll study Sharia, I'll go study Islamic studies. Of course, this is a generalization. There are many scholars who went in it and very intelligent, but it's generally the trend that was happening. Now, this person, he goes and he studies Islam, and his classmate, he's like, I'm smarter than him. I remember this guy from school. He was getting C's and D's and F's. He wasn't intelligent, and I'm the smart one. I'm going to the masjid now. Should I listen to him? Why would I do that? I know this guy is not intelligent. I know he didn't do good in school. And I'm smarter. I'll just read the Quran myself. I'll read Hadith myself. I will do it better than him. And the problem when you have this class of scholars who generally were underachievers, they themselves started presenting Islam in a way that wasn't fit with reality. It was probably saying things that were against Islamic teachings and so on. So this put Islamic scholarship in a difficult position. The next thing we see is now the printing press is introduced, so now we have mass media and we have mass printing. So I'll just give you an example. From the year 1600 to the 1800s, there were only 4 translations of the Quran. There were only 4 translations of the Quran. From the year 1900 until the year about 2000, in the 1900s essentially, we reached 40 translations of the Quran. So it doubled by 10. Today, if you look at how many translations of the Quran are out there, the Quran has been translated in more than 110 languages. The Hadith books have been translated in so many different languages. This creates an environment where people no longer need scholars. They can go directly to text themselves. I'm not saying this is a good or bad thing. It definitely has its pros and its cons, but this is a modern phenomenon that didn't exist in Islamic history. So now we have the internet that comes about. And even before the internet, if someone wanted to, for example, write an article for a newspaper, usually if you wanted to write for a newspaper, you had to put your name, attach your name to that. If you wanted to write for any newspaper, you had to contact the editor so they knew who you were. You had to send them your piece, and you had to put your name, right? Even if you didn't put your name, the editor would know who you are. Now we live in a time where people can speak anonymously, post anonymously, do all of these things without attaching their name or their reputation with it. We are experiencing what we can call the death of not expertise per se, but the death of authority, where experts are competing with non-experts. So you have all different types of people and everything. Whether it's medicine, people are also debating medicine and science online. People are debating Islam online. So you have a scholar debating with sometimes a 15-year-old. He doesn't know if he's a 15 or 16-year-old. A seasoned scholar who's maybe writing something or posting something or sharing something, and the person responding to him or her may have no expertise, but the world doesn't see that. You don't see the person behind the screen. So this causes a problem of authority. The person who is witnessing this now has a difficulty in seeing who is a scholar, who is an ustaz, who is a motivational speaker, who is this, who is that. All of these different things, they create a sense of chaos in the way people interact with scholarship in Islam. So certain scholars started raising awareness, and they started saying, hey, this internet that we have, it's a cause of an affliction. So Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, he actually was saying in the late 1990s, he was saying that the computer is musibatu zaman. This computer is the affliction of our time. And other scholars, and I mentioned other scholars in my article who have said something along the lines that the internet has caused chaos of our time. However, despite all of this, these scholars, to remain part of this conversation, needed to also participate in this online discussion. If someone wants to be there and be part of the conversation, they needed to be part of this. So this created a world where people, the average person, is no longer just accepting or passively taking in knowledge. They are now participants in it. In the past, if someone wanted to share what they thought about Islam or they wanted to teach Islam, they usually had a very limited circle of people. They would share it with their family at a dinner table or maybe some friends at a local mosque or in their business. However, today, anyone with internet access can share this with the entire world. And this creates, again, a sense of confusion because the scholar is competing with, or the expert is competing with the non-expert. So there is a responsibility on two sides. One is the scholar has a responsibility to be part of this conversation. The scholar's voice online and on YouTube and on the internet generally is very important so people can find that voice of reason of scholarship and distinguish that from the non-expert. For the person who is not a scholar, what is their responsibility? There is again a lot of confusion about who to trust and who to learn from. That person has to do their due diligence and make sure that they see signs of scholarship. What do other scholars say about this person? Are his ideas contradicting the majority of scholars? Just like you research for anything else. You're going to the doctor, you research. How do you know if this doctor is good or not? You check your what other people have experienced with them. What are their, credentials? What are all of these different things? You do that. So both systems definitely have their pros and cons. The traditional way of learning has what we can call quality control, where they made sure that every scholar they produced has understood the text properly, has morality, has a general sense of adab. At the same time, the system wasn't perfect either. Sometimes the scholars, they gate kept. They made sure certain people were allowed access and others didn't. If you were poor, for example, you didn't have the luxury of going to a scholar and traveling. If you're a woman, you didn't have the luxury of just going up to a scholar and asking him a question. Scholars also, it's not like scholars were readily available at every corner where if you had a question, you can just go and ask them. The introduction of the internet has removed this obstacle where anyone who has any kind of question or wants to access a scholar can go to them directly using the internet, using, even if not a scholar, getting answers directly from the internet, from translations, from YouTube videos, and all of these things are there, and this is good. At the same time, the con of this is that the human element is lost and the depth is sometimes traded for access. Another con of this modern way that we learn or through the internet is that there is this educational chaos where there is everyone speaking at the same time, the expert and the non-expert, the person who has an agenda and the person who's a sincere scholar, the freshman in high school and the seasoned scholar, both kind of speaking and competing against each other for the attention of the masses. Now, this is kind of the story of how we went from learning from scholars to books to cassettes to the internet and Google and AI. And now we're at AI, right? Where you literally will have the AI answer your question before you're done typing. So where do we go from here? I don't think there's a simple answer, but I think what we all know is that we are on the brink of a transformation again with this new technology that is going to be of similar scale, if not more, than the introduction of the smartphone to our society and the internet and social media. And hopefully Muslims and scholars, we can find a way to leverage this to the best of our community's interest.